Chapter 21 Unexpected Lineup. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is that? On the way back to the fighter plane, when passing by a room filled with various advanced machines, Hawking's heart moved and he pointed to the pool in the middle pretending to be curious. Wolverine explained with a complex expression, That's where I was first experimented on, and the silver liquid bubbling next to it was adamantium alloy, according to Stryker. The original liquid can only be maintained at high temperatures and will be indestructible once cooled. After saying that, he glared hard at Stryker, who was being held by Colossus. Stryker covered his right hand that was pierced by Wolverine and said sarcastically, "You should be grateful to me. Without me, you would still be using those broken bones as weapons. Then let me use them to thank you properly." Upon hearing this, Wolverine instantly popped out his adamantium alloy wolf claws with both hands, and was about to hit Stryker a few more times. However, he was stopped by Professor X. "Logan, don't kill him first, but keep him to prove the assassination and make the president give up his decision to go to war against mutants." Stryker controls Nightcrawler to assassinate the president in an attempt to provoke a war between humans and mutants. In a few days, the president will disclose the threat of mutants on the news and issue an order for war with mutants. He needs to come up with evidence that Stryker started all this in order to solve this crisis. While Wolverine was talking to Professor X, Hawking had already quickly ran to the pool. He looked around and found a suitable hollow tube nearby, picked up the adamantium alloy syringe and poured it into it. After the original liquid cooled down, he squeezed it hard, and the tube shattered, and a thick and hard adamantium alloy long stick appeared in his hand. When the Wukong template is loaded, he has the Rui stick, but in normal state he has no weapons. Although all Scions like to fight with bare hands, when he is not strong enough, he feels that he is stronger with weapons than without weapons. In the future world, Big Trantus also carries a sword when he fights androids. Adamantium alloy is one of the hardest metals in the Marvel world. In addition to being able to maintain a liquid state at high temperatures when it is first smelted, it becomes indestructible once cooled. Even at a high temperature of 500,000 degrees Celsius, there is still no sign of melting. It's rare to encounter it now, so how can we waste it and stay here? In fact, if there wasn't a mold nearby, he would have wanted a knife or a sword, which would be more lethal. It's a pity that we can't stay here for a long time, and we can't dismantle the whole machine and take it away. Once the machine stops and the liquid cools down, it can no longer be melted and can only be used to make sticks. Get out quickly, there's trouble. King Hua was making an adamantium alloy rod here, but Professor X's expression changed over there. "Professor, what's going on?" Storm asked quickly. She had rarely seen Professor X with such a solemn expression, even when facing Magneto directly. Eric was fighting with people outside the base and was about to lose it. "What?" Everyone was shocked when they heard this. They were well aware of Magneto's power. If they were serious, they might not be Magneto's opponent together, who can beat Magneto but can't hold on. At this time, Hawking, who came back with the adamantium alloy rod, was also stunned, because this situation was completely beyond his expectation. At least in the plots he knew, this didn't happen. What the fuck, S.H.I.E.L.D. On the snow outside the base, Hawking's eyes suddenly widened as he looked at the group of people fighting Magneto. The one holding the shield is the same as the one in the comics. He is obviously Captain Britain's Carter, and the one holding the bow and arrow is probably Hawkeye Barton, the one with red hair who looks 16 or 17 years old, but who is agile and can fight on par with Mystique, maybe the Black Widow who just blew up the Red House and joined S.H.I.E.L.D. The bald black man with an eye patch standing behind them and the white man with M-shaped hair lost next to them are most likely Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. As for the black woman whose whole body was wrapped in energy, who was holding Lao Wanda in the air above her head, needless to say, it must be Maria Rambeau, the friend of Captain Marvel in the main universe and the founder of Skyward Sword Bureau, who has now become Captain Marvel in this universe. If these people were picked out individually, he really wouldn't be able to recognize them because of their age, but if they were put together, it would be obvious. Why is S.H.I.E.L.D. here? As soon as the idea came to mind, Hawking couldn't help but slap himself on the head and secretly scolded himself for negligence. Although what he is experiencing now is very similar to the plot of his Independent Mutant movie, this is not an Independent Mutant universe, but the 838 universe. In addition to mutants, most of Marvel's characters and organizations exist, so how could S.H.I.E.L.D. not intervene in such a big matter when the president was attacked by mutants? The newly established S.H.I.E.L.D. might not be able to get involved, but it is already 2000. By this time, Nick Fury should have been the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., leading S.H.I.E.L.D. to truly develop. According to Nick Fury's arrogant character who wants to control all dangers in his own hands, how could he easily let mutants cause trouble? You must know that when there are no mutants in the main universe, anyone with superpowers in the world will be found and monitored by S.H.I.E.L.D., and there will be a special list. What surprised him was that Captain Marvel in this world still stayed on Earth and did not leave for the universe, because Carol, Captain Marvel of the main world, after defeating the invading Kree in 1995, went to the universe to maintain peace in the universe, leaving only a BB machine for Nick Fury. I think the universe is different, the characters are different, the personalities are different, and many things develop differently, just like Captain Carter of England. Logically, he shouldn't appear now. In order to prevent a plane carrying a nuclear bomb from blowing up New York, Captain America in the main universe crashed into a glacier with the plane. He was not discovered and unsealed until 2011 by S.H.I.E.L.D., and Captain Carter of this universe, according to the comics he read, was sealed to a different space in order to prevent the Red Skull from using the cosmic cube to release Hydra. Boom! Captain Marvel punched through the combat helicopter in front of him and knocked Magneto out of the air. Hawkeye saw the right moment and shot a special non-metallic anesthesia arrow, which numbed Magneto and fainted. At the same time, during the battle with Black Widow, Mystique was hit in the back of the head with a shield by Captain Carter and fainted. You must be Professor Charles. I am Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. I am ordering you and your students to come with me and accept the investigation on the attack on the president. Don't try to resist, you should have seen the fate of these two. After successfully capturing Magneto and Mystique, Nick Fury also saw Professor X coming out of the spillway, as well as the teleporting mutant who had attacked the president. Chapter 22 X-Men vs. S.H.I.E.L.D. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. S.H.I.E.L.D. Hearing this name, Professor X also had a puzzled look on his face. He was quite familiar with the CIA. After all, he had deep contact with them during the First War, when he even fell in love with a female CIA agent. As for S.H.I.E.L.D., he really hadn't heard of it. He tried to activate his ability to read the other party's memory, but found that his mind-reading ability did not work. We used to be called the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. By the way, Professor Charles, don't try to control me with your abilities. Since I dare to come here to arrest you, I must be prepared. Nick Fury reached out and tapped his neck, where a circular device with blue light was attached. The brainwave interference device is modified from the device used by the Kree Supreme Intelligence to control Captain Marvel's thoughts. It can perform a certain degree of mental intrusion and protection. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was actually an incident caused by the mutant Black Emperor. He obtained all the intelligence stored in the CIA after taking office as director. In view of the terrifying abilities of Magneto and Professor X, he has never dared to take action, but this time the mutants attacked the president, which had already touched his bottom line. In addition, the device that resisted Professor X's mind control had just been modified, so he took action decisively. I think there is a misunderstanding between us. Professor X did not want to conflict with government agencies, so he patiently explained what happened. Unfortunately, Nick Fury is not the type to be easily persuaded. Needless to say, after taking you back, I will find out the real answer. If the assassination of the president has nothing to do with you, and if you are willing to sign an agreement at that time, then I can consider letting you go back. Who is the mastermind behind the attack on the president is not very important to him. Even if it is true as Professor X said, he cannot let him go so easily. For humans, mutants are always time bombs. Although he has no intention of exterminating mutants, the development of mutants must be under his supervision, so as long as the two leaders of the mutant forces, Magneto and Professor X, are controlled, the rest will not be a concern. I'm sorry, but I cannot leave the safety of my students in the hands of a government agency that doesn't understand it. After hearing Nick Fury's strong reply, Professor X shook his head. No matter how naive he is, he will never be so naive as to believe that government agencies will treat them mutants equally and will really arrest them and confirm the facts before releasing them. he had made this mistake once before, and the result was that all the students were forced into a cruel battlefield, and either died in battle or were turned into experimental materials by some careerists. For this reason, he was depressed for a long time before he figured it out and got back on his feet. So after the school opened again, he began to train X-Men who could fight to protect his students from destruction. He believes that the entire human race will eventually go on the right path and create a better future with mutants, but this trust does not include certain government agencies. Then there is no other way. I can only deal with you like I dealt with Mr. Eric. As Nick Fury's voice fell, Captain Marvel, Captain Carter, Black Widow, Hawkeye and 3 heavily armed S.H.I.E.L.D. agent teams launched an attack here. Previously, because they were worried about being affected by Magneto's ability, the 3 S.H.I.E.L.D. agent teams had been hiding in the distance, led by Agent May. At this time, Magneto has been taken down, and they all carry devices that can block mind control, so they can naturally cooperate in the attack. X-Men, fight! Upon seeing this, Professor X had no choice but to issue a battle order. Storm's eyes turned white when she activated her power, and the sky suddenly became covered with dark clouds. Under her control, lightning struck at the gun-wielding S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, Wolverine and Death Girl, who regained their consciousness, ejected their adamantium wolf claws and rushed towards Captain Carter, Black Widow, and May. Cyclops opened his eyes with red shock waves, and struck Captain Marvel, who was wrapped in energy in the air. Colossus turned into steel and stood in front of Cyclops and Storm, helping them block the stray bullets fired at them. Nightcrawler, a Christian who has little combat experience, is responsible for protecting the weak Professor X and guarding him to prevent Stryker from escaping in the chaos. Call out! At this time, a sharp arrow, at a very special and sinister angle, escaped Colossus' defense and shot towards Storm, who was controlling the field to release lightning. It was Hawkeye Barton who was hiding in a hidden corner. Seeing that Storm was so powerful in controlling the field that a large number of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were stunned, he launched a sneak attack on her. Hold it for me! Throwing the adamantium alloy long stick in his hand to the Knight Raider, Hawking also pulled out the wishful stick and took action. He understands that in fact, everyone else in S.H.I.E.L.D. has no big problem, and the main opponent is Captain Marvel. The Captain Marvel of the 838 universe is not Carol, who has a strong character and strong heart, but his best friend Maria Rambeau. Her strength may be slightly inferior, but she is definitely abnormal. Even Lao 1 was defeated by her in the end, so he has to remove the obstacles as quickly as possible and let everyone work together to help Cyclops deal with Captain Marvel. He jumped up, and with the wishful stick in his hand, he accurately knocked away the arrows shot by Hawkeye, and then the figure flashed and rushed towards the hiding place of Hawkeye. Hawkeye is not very powerful, but his arrows are very tricky, especially in group fights, and he is very restrained against types like Storm and Cyclops. Whoosh! 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 Seeing Hawking, who was just a child, rushing towards him quickly, Hawkeye did not dare to be careless, and shot at Hawking as fast as an arrow, and the arrows of each arrow had special abilities, such as electric shock, paralysis, mucus, etc. Afterimage punch. However, Hawking didn't want to get entangled, and directly used the afterimage fist to leave a series of afterimages, and rushed to Hawkeye as quickly as possible. Fall down, you! In the face of absolute speed and strength, Hawking was knocked unconscious to the ground with a stick by Hawking without even being able to block a single move from the approaching Hawkeye. But when he wanted to help and deal with the others first, the Cyclops over there could no longer stop him. Captain Marvel, who was in the air, was able to withstand the red shock wave emitted by Cyclops with all his strength, and was almost in front of him. If Captain Marvel were to get close to him, Cyclops would probably be killed in one move. Storm also noticed this, and quickly concentrated all the lightning, and attacked Captain Marvel with Cyclops, which slowed her down. However, it only slowed down. Captain Marvel was still approaching them. Turtle-style Qigong. Upon seeing this, Hawking quickly moved to the side of the confrontation between the two sides, and a Qigong wave with full output hit Captain Marvel's face. Because Captain Marvel's power was concentrated on fighting Cyclops and Storm, he was accidentally pushed out. Chapter 23: The Terrifying Saiyan Giant Ape. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. You can't even break through the defense. Seeing Captain Marvel being knocked away by his full turtle Qigong, he just shook his head and rushed forward again. Hawking also frowned. Also, the main universe surprise can directly physically blast the Kree space battleship, and even if the 838 universe surprise pulls it off a little, it is not something that the turtle school Qigong of his level can defeat, neither does adding Storm and Cyclops. Others who also saw this scene had horror in their eyes, and Nick Fury persuaded him again. You have no chance of winning. There is no need to engage in unnecessary confrontation. If it really has nothing to do with you, I will not hurt you afterwards. However, how could Hawking bet his fate on the character of Nick Fury in this universe? Even if Professor X compromised, he would not compromise, so in line with the principle of catching the thief first, he flashed his figure and rushed directly towards Nick Fury as fast as possible. As long as Nick Fury is captured and used as a hostage, there is a high probability that Captain Marvel can be forced to stop and then successfully withdraw to New York. When Nick Fury returns to New York, it will be difficult to arrest them. On the one hand, he must consider whether he can afford the destructive consequences of such a level of battle in New York. On the other hand, we must also consider how many humans will suffer once Professor X goes rampant in the city. In addition, as long as the evidence of Stryker's provocation is handed over to the President in time, Nick Fury will have no legitimate reason to attack Professor X. What's more, Professor, that it's just that imagination is beautiful, but reality is not easy. Seeing Hawking rushing towards Nick Fury, Captain Marvel gave up arresting Professor X and turned around to stop Hawking. Hawking is fast, but Captain Marvel can not only fly, but also be faster. Kid, stop, I promise you, as long as you obey, Fury will not hurt you. Seeing that Hawking was a child, Captain Marvel just stopped him and did not attack immediately. But I don't think so. Maybe you don't know him that well. Hawking narrowed his eyes and performed the Kame Senryu hand gesture. Energy attacks are useless, so he can only fight hand to hand, which is what he is good at. I don't understand him. He is my husband, how could I not understand him? However, Captain Marvel's next words made Hawking, who was about to take action, panic. What? Captain Marvel and Nick Fury are married. But after thinking about it, it doesn't seem to be too inconsistent. After all, both of them are black, and their race and skin color match well. Moreover, in the main world, Maria Rambeau also got married very early and had a daughter. It is obvious that she is not as interested in marriage and love as Carol. After the two experienced the Kree incident together, it was only natural that they fell in love and eventually got married. This also explains why at this point in time, Captain Marvel is not helping other planets enslaved by the Kree in the universe, but has been staying on Earth to help Nick Fury. Triple afterimage fist. After reacting, Hawking launched another attack. Regardless of whether Captain Marvel and Nick Fury are a couple, they are enemies that need to be defeated for him now. Leaving behind three phantoms to confuse, Hawking's body had flashed over Captain Marvel, and his hand slashed down towards her neck. His target is the brainwave jamming device on Captain Marvel's neck. Even if Captain Marvel can't be defeated this time and the brainwave jamming device can be destroyed, then Professor X's mind control can work. He doesn't believe that Captain Marvel can be completely immune to Professor X's mind control. However, Captain Marvel's strength still exceeded his expectations. He actually dodged his attack and raised his hand to grab the clothes behind his back and pick him up. You are indeed very fast, but you can't hide it from me yet. Since you are disobedient, I can only knock you out first. Watching Captain Carter and Black Widow locked in a tough fight over there, most of the ordinary S.H.I.E.L.D. agents led by May were also eliminated. Captain Marvel stopped delaying and raised his hand to knock Hawking unconscious with a palm. It seems like this is the only way. Faced with such a desperate situation, Hawking no longer held back. He manipulated his tail to knock off the Mickey Mouse sunglasses on his face, and stared directly at the round full moon in the sky. Dong dong. Dong 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 dong. For a moment, his heart seemed to be stimulated by something, and it began to jump at a high speed, and his body also expanded rapidly, bursting through the martial arts uniform, and breaking free from Captain Marvel's restraints. This kid, what's going on? Seeing his body getting bigger and bigger, with more and more hair, and finally transformed into the giant ape Hawking, who was 14 to 15 meters tall, Captain Marvel was so frightened that he immediately retreated and flew away for a distance. Roar! Hawking's eyes were red and he shouted at the moon. An uncontrollable anger and desire for destruction filled his brain, telling him constantly, destroy, destroy, destroy everything. If it were just a simple low-level warrior Sun Wukong, he must have completely lost his mind at this time, but fortunately, in addition to the character of Sun Wukong under the protagonist's template, the person who occupies the dominant consciousness is Hawking himself, so he still retains a trace of sanity. Although he still couldn't suppress the anger and desire for destruction in his mind, he tried his best to focus on Captain Marvel floating in the air. He slammed his hands into the ground twice, and the powerful force immediately shattered the ice-covered earth. He opened his mouth, and a huge energy cannon that was 10 times more powerful than the ordinary turtle-style qigong shot out of his mouth and went straight towards Captain Marvel. Boom! But even though Captain Marvel released the energy in his body immediately, he was still rushed away. Roar! But with another roar, Hawking jumped hard and caught up with Captain Marvel, who was knocked away. He put his hands together and hit him down with all his strength. After that, there was a blast of hammers on the ground, plus a crazy output of energy waves from the mouth. 13-year-old Wukong climbed the Kalen Tower and defeated Tao Bai. His combat power should be more than 120, around 140, because Tao Bai's combat power is 120. After transforming into a giant ape, the combat power is increased tenfold, which means the combat power is around 1,400. This combat power value has already caught up with Raditz. Raditz's combat power is 1,500. Under normal circumstances, he can destroy the civilization of a planet by himself. Think about how Piccolo, who had only 260 combat power at that time, captured the technologically advanced Dragon Ball Earth capital by himself. The full-out energy attack during the decisive battle with Goku almost created a mushroom cloud effect, so at this time, Hawking in the form of a giant ape is really capable of fighting against Captain Marvel of the 838 universe. Chapter 24 Saiyan Giant Ape vs. Captain Marvel. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Get out of my way. Captain Marvel, who was beaten deep into the ground by Hawking's giant ape form, finally burst out in anger. She burst out all the energy in her body, broke through Hawking's suppression in one fell swoop, and punched Hawking away with the energy pillar. Roar! Under attack, Hawking became even angrier, and even his remaining sanity was covered up by instinct. The energy wave from his mouth exploded towards Captain Marvel without any cost, and his body jumped up again to attack him. The two sides were going back and forth, and the fight was so intense that the whole world was shattered, but overall, Captain Marvel has the upper hand. Because Captain Marvel can fly and has a small body, so he can easily dodge Hawking's attacks and is not so easy to be hit. After Hawking transformed into a giant ape, his body was too big, so his movements were inevitably slower, and he had many flaws in his attacks, but Hawking's destructive power is very terrifying. In the form of a giant ape, he seems to have no energy restrictions. The energy cannons fired from his mouth are one after another without any effort at all. The key is that he himself is rough and thick-skinned. Although Captain Marvel's attack hurt him very much, it was not fatal. Of course, it is also possible that Captain Marvel knew that he was still a child and could not kill him. After all, he was not as sinister as Nick Fury. The most important point is that Captain Marvel has to take into account the safety of S.H.I.E.L.D. and others over there. Although the place where the two were fighting was now quite a distance away from the snowy field at the beginning, Hawking's energy cannon would still accidentally shoot there from time to time. If she didn't block it, that one shot could directly kill all S.H.I.E.L.D. members except Captain Carter. To be honest, if Hawking hadn't lost all his sanity at this time, catching Nick Fury and the others and firing energy cannons would have made Captain Marvel tired of dealing with it. Oh, hell, Hawking, I'll never call you little monkey again. Looking at the brutal Hawking in the form of a giant ape, Wolverine took Professor X and others and quickly evacuated in the direction where the X-Fighter was parked. Before setting off, he had heard from Storm that Hawking could have a second burst of power. If it reached the point where he could no longer control it, he would have Nightcrawler take him to teleport and cut off Hawking's tail. At the time, he actually didn't take it seriously, thinking that Hawking might be making a fuss out of a molehill. Now he realized that it was not a fuss at all. Hawking in the form of a giant ape casually slapped the ground and the earth cracked. The energy cannon shot from his mouth was even more powerful and terrifying. Ever since Hawking transformed into a giant ape and fought Captain Marvel, they could no longer continue fighting. The ground was shaking and collapsing. The energy cannon that Hawking occasionally fired near them turned into a huge crater, and the aftermath of the light made them unsteady. If the shot hits the dam and the dam breaks, all of them standing here will be swept away. It can only be said that it is fortunate that Stryker's base is very far away from the city and is built on an uninhabited mountain and lake. Otherwise, it would be a catastrophe now. Nick Fury over there was obviously aware of this, and no longer bothered with Professor. Originally, according to his plan, he could basically capture Magneto and Professor X at no cost, but he didn't expect that among Professor. If he continues to destroy like this, even if he wins in the end, he will be in trouble afterwards. The X-Fighter and S.H.I.E.L.D's Quinjet took off almost at the same time, but they did not leave. Instead, they hovered over Captain Marvel and Hawking, observing the battle between the two below. If Captain Marvel wins, with Captain Marvel's speed, if the X-Fighters don't escape now, they won't be able to escape soon. If Hawking wins, S.H.I.E.L.D's arrest operation can only be considered half a success, and the X-Men can evacuate smoothly. But as far as the current situation is concerned, Captain Marvel clearly has the upper hand. Professor, what should we do now? On the X-Fighter, Storm piloted the fighter and looked at Professor X. Hawking is now transformed into a giant ape and has lost his mind, and they don't know how long it can last. Professor, see if we can get through the signal on the other side. I want to talk to the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Professor X thought for a moment and replied to Storm, it would definitely not work to cut off Hawking's tail now, and he wouldn't be able to leave Hawking and run away like this. It would be even less advisable to use auxiliary attacks, because the S.H.I.E.L.D. over there would definitely do the same, so he wanted to try to see if he could reach agreement on terms through negotiation. The situation now was different from the situation just now. At least they were evenly matched. Under the control of Storm, the signal was quickly connected to the Quinjet fighter from S.H.I.E.L.D. on the opposite side. Director Fury, if we continue fighting like this, we will both lose. Do you really want mutants and humans to go to war? And if they continue to fight like this, it's hard to guarantee that they won't hit the city. I don't think either of us is willing to see the result. The opponent doesn't know the timeliness of Hawking's ability to explode, nor does he know Hawking's weaknesses. This is their advantage in negotiating. On the other side, Nick Fury replied after a moment of silence. I don't want to start a war with mutants, I just want to find out the truth of the matter. It's because of your lack of cooperation that this happened. At this time, he was also a little bit stuck. As the battle between Hawking and Captain Marvel escalated, several hills in the Rocky Mountains were bombarded to the ground, and there were huge craters everywhere in the forest on the ground. I don't know how bad the consequences would be if the fight continued, but he was unwilling to just give up. In this way, Director Fury, when I return to New York, I will take Colonel Stryker and all the evidence to your S.H.I.E.L.D. for investigation. For now, please let my students go. Professor X gave the steps, and Nick Fury also planned to follow these steps. His purpose is to control the threat of mutants in his own hands and turn it into his own power to deal with powerful alien civilizations outside the Earth in the future. It's not really about fighting to the death with mutants, although this result is not satisfactory now. It can be said that it is in the past. At least the anti-human Magneto has been caught. Later, we can slowly continue to talk with Professor X, a mutant who is close to humans. However, just when he was about to agree to Professor X's proposal, the battlefield changed. Hawking, who was in the form of a giant ape, suddenly shook his body, and then began to shrink rapidly and returned to the appearance of a child. Professor Charles, I think it would be better for you to follow me to S.H.I.E.L.D. for investigation now, that the changes on the battlefield have completely shifted the situation to S.H.I.E.L.D. side, and Nick Fury will naturally no longer agree to Professor X's proposal. Chapter 25 The Rational Magic Ape appears. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The time for Wukong's template is up, and his combat effectiveness will not be so strong after the transformation. Hawking felt that his body was shrinking rapidly, his sanity was returning again, and he suddenly felt something bad inside. Although he also has Saiyan blood in his body and can transform into a giant ape even without loading the Goku template, his combat power is not much stronger even if it is increased tenfold. What's more, there are also the after effects of ending the template. You might faint before you can change again. Needless to say, the final result is that all the X-Men will be taken away and imprisoned by S.H.I.E.L.D., and the subsequent situation will definitely not be so good. At this time, he also realized that although the protagonist template loaded was powerful, it was an external force after all. Once the external force disappeared, he would become useless again. You can borrow external forces, but in the end you still have to strengthen yourself. In this way, even if one day his magical loading protagonist panel disappears, he will still be powerful. After this time, his focus will still be on the cultivation of his own body. When his physical strength reaches the same level as 13-year-old Wukong, will he truly have some ability to protect himself? At that time, loading the Wukong template only added a wishful stick. After loading, the wishful stick would disappear at best, which would have little impact on his strength. Fortunately, my justice value by killing the Master of Illusion and preventing Professor X from destroying mutants is enough for me to open the next template. Although Wukong's template cannot be used, he can still draw a new template, but what the new template is depends on luck. If you draw an Ultraman, the crisis will be solved immediately. Relying on his strong willpower, he endured the dizziness after loading the protagonist template, and quickly opened the panel to check it out. The justice value progress bar is full, and a protagonist template can be drawn. Do you want to draw? Extract. I chose extraction without hesitation. No matter who the next protagonist template is, as long as he loads it immediately after being drawn, there is a chance that the bug will cancel the backswing caused by the last loading of the protagonist template, so that he will not fall into a coma. The drawing is over. The protagonist template drawn this time is 14-year-old Harry Potter from the Harry Potter world. Do you want to load it? 14-year-old Harry Potter is in 4th grade, that is, when he is in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Load. It's definitely disappointing to say that Harry Potter is a template. Although the various magics are not strong in attack power, their magical effects can provide him with great assistance in his later life. For example, the lock-picking spell can open any lock, the transformation spell can temporarily change the properties of objects, the repair spell can repair items, etc. But these magics can only assist, and are not enough to deal with Captain Marvel. With the successful loading of the Harry Potter protagonist template, Hawking, who had returned to normal, changed again. The clothes on his body changed from the X-Men battle uniform to a black wizard robe. His hair was fluffy, he wore glasses on his face, and there was a lightning symbol on his forehead. He has a firebolt broomstick and a large cloak in his left hand, and a holly wand in his right hand. There are also firebolts and invisibility cloaks. That he expected that there was a magic wand. After all, the Sun Wukong template also had a wish-fulfilling wand when it was loaded, but the presence of a broomstick and an invisibility cloak was beyond his expectation. But after thinking about it, the speed of the firebolt is about 240 km per hour. Even if he rides on it and escapes now, he can't outrun Captain Marvel, a pervert who can travel in the universe. The invisibility cloak, on the other hand, might allow him to hide if he finds a rare opportunity to put it on. Invisibility cloaks are the 3 major Deathly Hallows in the Harry Potter world, and have permanent invisibility effects. Legend has it that even the God of Death cannot find people wearing invisibility cloaks. Presumably it should be easy to see through without being high-tech. However, if he escapes, Professor X and others will not be spared. By then, without Professor. Let's transform first, maybe we can bluff him. Putting away his distracting thoughts, Hawking looked up at the big moon in the sky. Dong dong. Dong 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 dong. The familiar racing heartbeat came again. As expected, this bloodline is not covering, but superimposing. He had already guessed that loading the protagonist template did not just turn him into the protagonist, but superimposed it on his own original one. Originally, he was just an ordinary person, so no changes could be seen when superimposing the Wukong template. Now that his body is a Saiyan, when he loads Harry Potter's bloodline, he becomes Harry Potter with a Saiyan body. Of course, at present, his physical strength is slightly stronger than that of ordinary people, and the superposition of the two does not seem to make much difference. At most, he is stronger than a normal little wizard, but if you develop further, wait until his strength reaches the level of the Goku template, and then load the Harry Potter template, then he will become a magical Saiyan. If the Wukong template is added, he will become Wukong with double strength, directly 280 combat power. In fact, this is nothing. The more protagonist templates are unlocked later, and the more bloodlines and abilities are superimposed, the more powerful he will become and there will be almost no weaknesses. Roar! With a roar, the wizard's robe was torn on the spot, and Hawking once again transformed into a terrifying giant ape 14 to 15 meters tall. Only this time, he clearly noticed a difference. It's not that the combat power has been reduced a lot, that's for sure. The giant ape that is now incarnated does not seem to have any difference in appearance from before, but the combat power is completely different. Before, it was the giant ape incarnated by Wukong with a combat power of 140, and the combat power was as high as 1,400 points. But now it is the giant ape incarnated by his original body with a combat power of 10. The combat power is at most 100, which is not as high as the combat power of Wukong before his transformation, but bluffing is still enough. As long as he doesn't take action, others will definitely think that his strength is as terrifying as before. What really surprised him was that after transforming into a giant ape, he clearly felt that the anger and desire for destruction could be suppressed. Now he can completely control the giant ape form very rationally, just like an advanced Saiyan warrior like Vegeta, and he also vaguely felt that if he wanted to, he could suppress the anger and destructive desire with all his strength in order to release the giant ape form and return to its normal form. This allows him to freely control his transformation and switch forms even when the moon is full. After Harry Potter's wizard blood was superimposed on his own Saiyan blood, it perfectly solved the shortcomings of lower-level Saiyan warriors who were irrational after transforming into giant apes, and also solved the shortcomings of Man-Yu's inability to control the transformation. Chapter 26 Boy, I owe you a favor. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Could it be that the wizard's bloodline is also spiritual? Recalling the wizards in Harry Potter, they never seem to lack magic power when casting spells. Maybe the blood of wizards mainly lies in the soul and spirit. Use your spirit to transform the infinite energy of the outside world into magic power, thereby performing magic. Therefore, if wizards use too much magic, they will feel a little mentally exhausted at most, but they will not run out of magic power. There are also some evil black magic that can pollute the spirit. If a young wizard does not learn magic and is mentally stimulated, he will become obscurant. The stronger the spiritual will, sometimes the power of magic will increase. Some wizards will turn into ghosts when they die. Voldemort's soul can still possess animals after death, and then recreate the body and resurrect it. All signs seem to confirm his suspicion. He boldly hypothesized that the lower-level Saiyan warriors transformed into giant apes because their minds could not suppress the anger and desire to talk nonsense in their blood, and thus lost their minds. Because he had his own spiritual superposition, he could still maintain a trace of sanity in the giant ape state. Therefore, now that he has the great spiritual blessing of the wizard bloodline, he can truly transform into a giant ape like a superior Saiyan warrior while maintaining his sanity. Of course, these are all his own guesses based on his knowledge of the two bloodlines. Whether this is the case or not, he is not sure. Anyway, as long as it develops in a good direction, who cares? Ahem, that Professor Charles was just joking. I think your proposal just now is very good, and it is not impossible to consider. At this time, Nick Fury on the Quinjet looked at Hawking, who had transformed into a giant ape again, and made some awkward remarks. How about playing? One moment he transforms into a child and the next moment he transforms into a giant ape. How could he do this so casually? It made him think that I had the advantage. On the other side, Captain Marvel, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, couldn't help but frown when he saw Hawking transforming into a giant ape again. But she also discovered something different. That is, the giant ape's eyes were red and crazy just now, like a monster that only knew fighting and destruction. Now the giant ape's eyes have lost their redness, and are still turning around, and his temperament suddenly seems cunning. This also prevented her from attacking immediately. Maria, don't fight yet. At this time, Nick Fury's voice happened to come from her earphones. It was Nick Fury who wanted to negotiate with Professor X, so he told her not to attack the giant ape again for the time being. Similarly, while Hawking was thinking about what to do next, Professor X's voice also sounded in his ears. Hawking, how are you doing now? Can you maintain your sanity? Because of the anti-peeping function of the panel, Professor, the panel will not help Hawking intercept these, it just prevents his existence from being noticed by others. In fact, when Huajin Gang transformed into a giant ape, Now Professor X clearly felt that his mind had calmed down after transforming again. Professor, I can now control my current situation. Okay, let's stop fighting first, Nick Fury just now. Professor X told Hawking the contents of the negotiation he just had with Nick Fury. Hawking thought for a while and then replied. Okay, but Professor, judging from the situation just now, we can't completely believe that the other party will keep his promise. If we do this again. Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the chief agent, is not a man of principles and integrity. He is only willing to be forced by the situation. If a situation arises, negotiations may break down at any time. For example, knowing Hawking's true strength now, knowing the timeliness of his transformation, etc. So it's best to take full control of the situation, so as to avoid subsequent troubles. Okay, I'll do as you say. I'll let him come out for an interview, and then I'll hold him back to buy you some time. After hearing Hawking's proposal, Professor X thought for a moment and then agreed. Because of Nick Fury's performance just now, he also became less trusting of the leader of an organization similar to the CIA. I guess at least we don't have to fight now. Hawking looked at Captain Marvel across from him, trying hard to suppress the instinct of Saiyan blood. His body quickly shrank and turned into a child again. You're right, kid, but I suggest you wear some clothes. Captain Marvel landed opposite Hawking and smiled as he looked at Hawking, who was completely naked. Passing the wand from his right hand to his left hand, Hawking quickly picked up a fragment of a wizard's robe on the ground with some embarrassment and wrapped it around his waist. The transformation had just broken the wizard's robe, and now that he had recovered, his body had no clothes to wear. At this time, X-Fighters and Quinjet fighters also landed next to them, opening the hatch. Professor X led the mutants, Nick Fury led Captain Carter and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and walked out almost at the same time. I'm going to find something to wear inside. Of course, if I need to fight next, I don't have to go. I'm ready to transform at any time. Seeing the two sides meeting, Hawking pointed at the X-Fighter and said jokingly. I think our relationship will be harmonious in the future. Listening to Hawking's semi-threatening joke, Nick Fury squinted his one eye and tried to show a kinder expression. He has now classified the mutant boy in front of him into a highly dangerous level, even comparable to Professor. If this guy goes crazy in the city, it will definitely be a huge disaster. I also think this is just a misunderstanding. Just make it clear. Hawking, go and change your clothes in peace. At this time, Professor X also smiled cooperatively. That's best. Hawking nodded, then turned around and got on the X-Fighter. Recover as before. After boarding the fighter plane, he immediately cast a repair spell to restore the wizard's robe to its original shape, then quickly mounted the firebolt, put on the invisibility cloak, and slowly flew out again. The wizard's robe was torn when he first transformed, but he kept the firebolt, invisibility cloak and wand in his hands for good protection. Entering the fighter plane to change clothes is just a reasonable excuse to leave temporarily, completely covered by the wide invisibility cloak. Hawking rode the firebolt and carefully bypassed the negotiating and confrontation parties, and then quietly came to the hatch of the Quinjet. He carefully controlled the firebolt and flew into the Quinjet. After a search, he soon found Magneto and Mystique, who had been brought down by anesthesia. Everyone is petrified. Everything is petrified. Point 2 lightning-fast full-body binding spells locked the two S.H.I.E.L.D. agents guarding Magneto and Mystique in place, and Hawking pointed the wand at Magneto and Mystique. Resuscitate quickly. The resuscitation spell is a spell that can make people wake up instantly no matter what state they are in. Good evening, we meet again. As soon as Magneto and Mystique opened their eyes, they saw Hawking's smiling face that seemed to be floating in the air, and they almost thought they saw GUI. After roughly understanding what happened, Magneto looked at Hawking and said, "Boy, I owe you a favor." Chapter 27. The situation is reversed. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. What? S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are not allowed to enter the mutant school, they are not allowed to spy on mutant students and their families, and they are not allowed to disrupt your lives. Professor Charles, are your demands too much? As S.H.I.E.L.D., which maintains the peace and security of the entire human race, we have the right to interfere with any existence that threatens human security. Nick Fury replied in an angry tone. For some reason, since he came down for face-to-face negotiations, he found that Professor, how is it possible that S.H.I.E.L.D. has already intervened and you still want to go back to your previous life? Even if the attack on the president really has nothing to do with you, it is undeniable that our Mr. Kurt is the executor. He does have the ability to transform, which is a threat in itself. Professor Charles, I can agree to your other requests, but there is one thing. All mutant information must be recorded in S.H.I.E.L.D's database, so that we can respond in time when danger occurs. Of course, I can assure you that these mutant-related information will only exist in our S.H.I.E.L.D. database and will not be leaked to any other agency, including the CIA and FBI. Nick Fury gave his final bottom line. Director Fury, I also tell you clearly that this is impossible. Most mutants are not as dangerous as you think. Instead, they have been facing various dangers brought by humans. If there is a crisis because of mutants, you can inform me and I will take my X-Men to solve it. Professor X decisively rejected Nick Fury's request because this was also his bottom line. Professor Charles, you have to understand that if you continue to fight, you will definitely lose in the end. I just don't want the situation to get out of control, so I am willing to negotiate with you here. Nick Fury's tone also became stronger. Professor X doesn't trust him, and he also doesn't trust Professor. Besides, they still have the upper hand at the moment. He feels in his heart that as long as he persists until the end, Professor X will still be the one to compromise. As Nick Fury's voice fell, the atmosphere instantly became solemn. Just when the situation was about to break out, a cold voice suddenly broke the stalemate. Charles, I have said long ago that humans have always been like this. They are always afraid of creatures that are different from them. Sooner or later, all us mutants will be exterminated. Now you should realize it. Magneto. Hearing this voice, Nick Fury's pupils shrank instantly and he turned to look at Magneto, Mystique and Hawking who were coming off the Quinjet. Only then did he realize that Hawking had disappeared and never appeared. He was not changing clothes in the fighter plane. Instead, he somehow sneaked into the Quinjet under his nose and rescued Magneto and Mystique. Careless. Nick Fury quickly turned to look at Captain Marvel next to him. Catch him. Snapped. Magneto snapped his fingers, and the brainwave jammers around Nick Fury, Captain Marvel, Captain Carter, and all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents instantly shattered. Immediately afterwards, it fell into a stagnant state as if time had stood still. Hawking's purpose in releasing Magneto was not to join forces with him to defeat Surprise. With his current strength, there was no chance of winning even if they joined forces. His purpose is to have Magneto destroy the brainwave interference device so that Professor X's terrifying mind control ability can be used. Eric, they cannot represent the entire human race. Don't give up on humanity completely like this. Professor X replied with a smile. Magneto just shook his head and said nothing more. He couldn't convince Charles, and Charles couldn't convince him. As old friends and rivals for decades, they are the people who know each other best. At this moment, Captain Marvel roared and broke free from Professor X's mental control. I advise you not to move, otherwise they may all die. Hawking was not surprised when he saw this, and pointed at Nick Fury and others who were immobilized. Because Captain Marvel has absorbed the huge energy of the light-speed engine, he can basically no longer be regarded as a human being. The energy in his body is explosive, and his resistance in all aspects is terrible. There are no shortcomings at all. Therefore, although Professor X's mental control has an impact on her, it does not play a decisive role. What do you want? Captain Marvel looked at Professor X with a solemn expression. She naturally knows the abilities of Magneto and Professor X, and understands that no matter how fast she is, she will definitely not be able to move faster than Professor. Besides, there are also Hawking, who can transform into a giant ape at any time, and Magneto, who is also not easy to mess with. We just don't want to be disturbed, and we don't want to start a war with humans. Please tell Director Fury that I will bring Colonel Stryker and the evidence of his crime to your headquarters in 2 days to have a good talk. Professor X left a few words and took everyone on board the fighter plane. When the X-fighters completely disappeared from the sky, Nick Fury and others completely returned to normal. "Fury, how are you?" Upon seeing this, Captain Marvel immediately stepped forward and expressed concern. Nick Fury looked at all the mutants and X-fighters that suddenly disappeared around him, confusion flashed in his eyes, and then he reacted and looked at Captain Marvel. "Did Professor X activate his ability?" "Yes, he asked me to tell you." Captain Marvel nodded and roughly explained what had just happened. After listening, Nick Fury couldn't help but sigh. "It seems that the Avengers will be formed as soon as possible. Director Fury, I actually think what Professor Charles said is quite reasonable. They are also victims." At this time, Captain Carter came over with a shield, influenced by her former lover Steve. She has some ideological conflicts with the current Nick Fury. This time she came here to help capture the mutants who attacked the president, but for now, it seems that the real mastermind is not a mutant. If she had known this was the case, she would not have helped Nick Fury fight. She might as well have gone to find Steve who had disappeared, or go to the hospital to see Bucky who was seriously ill in bed. In 1945, in order to prevent the Red Skull from releasing Hydra from a different space, she pushed the Hydra into the different space by herself, and then struggled to kill it inside. We made an appointment to go dancing with Steve, but when the space opened again we didn't see Steve, Howard and Bucky, but a one-eyed bald black man. He calls himself Nick Fury and is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was the Strategic Science Corps back then. The sad thing is that in just a few minutes in a different space, 55 years have passed outside. Howard is dead, Bucky is old, and her lover Steve Rogers disappeared 55 years ago and his whereabouts are still unknown. Chapter 28 Strong Alliance. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. At the same time, on the X-Fighter flying to New York, Professor X looked at Magneto with a solemn expression and said, "I just read the director's memory. Human beings are stronger than we thought, and the Earth is not that safe. Maybe we should put aside some conflicts for the time being." The moment Magneto shattered the brainwave jammer, in addition to immobilizing everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D., he also took the opportunity to read the memory of director Nick Fury, and also learned about the existence of the Skrulls and the Kree. If it were before, he would still be confident that he and the X-Men could protect the students in the school and slowly change human beings' prejudice against mutants so that humans and mutants can live in harmony. Well, after today's battle and reading Nick Fury's memory, he understood that it was very difficult. If it hadn't been for Hawking's temporary outbreak, all of them would have been captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. To be honest, he was very lucky to have gone to Sokovia and recruited Hawking to become a student at the mutant school, so at this moment, he shared the information he knew with Magneto, hoping that Magneto could come back and deal with the situation with him like he did in the first battle, even if it was only temporary. "Charles, I can cooperate with you, but you have to understand that if I have the chance, I will destroy mankind and create a world with only mutants. If the whole world is full of mutants, I think those so-called aliens are nothing." Magneto looked at Professor X, his expression still arrogant. He has always believed that mutants are the next step in human evolution, beings that are more advanced than humans, and can even be said to be gods. Mutants are not afraid of aliens that humans cannot deal with. The premise is to first get rid of the shameless humans who like to fight and stab each other. When that time comes, I will stop you. At least until then we are fighting for the interests of mutants. Professor X replied with a smile. He didn't expect Magneto to be really cooperative, as long as a preliminary consensus was reached. Seeing Professor X and Magneto holding hands together, Hawking couldn't help but nodded inwardly. The combination of Magneto and Professor X is definitely 1 + 1 greater than 2, a true powerful combination. Professor X's strength is to deal with all living and thinking creatures, and his weakness is those cold machines and high-tech weapons. Magneto is just the opposite. All high-tech weapons rarely leave metal, so they must be restrained by Magneto. "Hawking, I have decided not to call you Little Monkey anymore. How about calling you Ape Demon? Or Donkey Kong is also good." At this time, Wolverine lit a cigar, smiled and patted Hawking on the shoulder. Having seen the place where he was experimented on and tortured Stryker, he has recovered most of his memories and untied the knot in his heart, so he decided to make X Academy his new home, and truly join the X-Men. Maybe he could occasionally be a guest teacher in the school, teaching combat and history. It should still be the Ape Demon, or the Ape God. Donkey Kong sounds too corny. At this time, Hawking, who was feeling relaxed, no longer cared about being nicknamed, and instead chatted with Wolverine. Death Girl, who was sitting behind the two of them, looked at Wolverine, who was chatting with Hawking in front of him with a very complicated expression. Her real name is Yuriko Koyama, a martial artist from Osaka and a mutant with the ability to heal herself. Stryker came to her a few years ago and told her that her father, who had disappeared for several years, died at the hands of Wolverine, and showed her a video of Wolverine killing his father. In order to seek revenge from Wolverine, she joined the new Weapon X transformation plan. As a result, after the transformation was successful, she did not embark on the road of revenge to find Wolverine as she wished. Instead, she was controlled by Stryker using the brain fluid of the Illusion Master to become a killing machine. During the past few years of being controlled, she also learned the real reason why her father was killed. It turns out that his scientist father was one of the scientists who was forcibly kidnapped from Osaka by Stryker to help complete the Weapon X program. The video of his death at the hands of Wolverine was actually an accidental manslaughter by Wolverine when he escaped from the base, so the real murderer of her father should be Stryker. Hi, Beauty, if you have nowhere to go, you can come to X College. I think the professor will welcome you very much. At this time, Wolverine also noticed Death Girl's gaze behind him, and smiled and extended the invitation. He felt sorry for accidentally killing Death Girl's father, and was very grateful that Death Girl was willing to help them fight against S.H.I.E.L.D's attack after she regained consciousness. Yes, the school should be in short supply of teachers in the future. At this time, Hawking nodded in agreement. For him, the stronger the mutant school, the better, which means that he, Wanda, and Pietro are safer. More than 40 minutes later, the loading time for the Harry Potter template ended. Hawking looked at the disappearing firebolt and invisibility cloak next to him, and couldn't help but think to himself before closing his eyes. Since there are even firebolts and invisibility cloaks, maybe the Wukong template can also have somersault clouds. Let's try shouting it next time when loading the template. When Hawking was unconscious due to the side effects of the template, Professor X also looked over. Little Hawking, are you a mutant? That he could not read Hawking's mind, nor could he sense the unique mutant brain waves emitted by Hawking, so he could not determine whether Hawking was a mutant at all, but based on Hawking's ability and the tail growing on his butt, it was judged that he was most likely a mutant. But after tonight's battle, he was not so sure, because Hawking has shown so many abilities, such as powerful body and energy, giant ape transformation, summoned weapons and clothes, with special abilities, etc. This was beyond his knowledge of mutants. At least so far, he had never seen any mutant with so many abilities. Forget it, whether you are or not, you are still a student of our school and a future X-Men. At the end of the day, Professor X was relieved. In fact, it is no longer that important to worry about whether Hawking is a mutant. Hawking goes to a mutant school and fights to protect mutants, so he is part of this big family. What's more, even if Hawking is not a mutant, his brother Pietro is 100% a mutant. That's it. Charles, sometimes I really envy you. There are too many elites in your school, but unfortunately many of them are wasted by you. Magneto, who was standing next to Professor X, was also looking at Hawking. Compared to the few in his fraternity, there are simply too many talented mutants in Charles's school. Eric, this is a school where I am. Not all students like fighting. They should have their own choices for the future. Professor X explained with a smile. Magneto shook his head after hearing this. But if they don't learn to fight, how can they protect themselves in the dangerous human society? Let's not talk about this anymore. It will take more than 2 hours to get to school. How about the next game? Professor X took out a chess set from a drawer of the fighter plane. Upon seeing this, Magneto took off his helmet and put it aside, and also showed a rare smile. I'll let you. No, you won't. Professor X also smiled. At this moment, they seemed to have returned to the past. Chapter 29 Edman Alloy Wand. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Such a short time has passed. Hawking woke up again and found that he had only been unconscious for an hour, and he was a little surprised. This time he used the Wukong template and the Harry template together. Unexpectedly, the side effects were the same as when he only used the Wukong template. it was obvious that the loading of Harry Potter's protagonist template had no side effects on his current body. He estimated that with his current physical fitness, he could completely withstand the side effects of the Harry Potter template. After all, the wizard's physical condition was not much stronger than that of a normal person. He turned around and looked around. Professor X is playing chess with Magneto, and Mystique squats between the two, looking at Professor. Storm and Cyclops were flying the plane in front, and Wolverine and Death were sitting together, seemingly chatting about their past, which made him always feel that these two people might have an affair in the future. Nightcrawler and Colossus are about the same age. One is a kind and devout Christian, and the other is a gentle and good-tempered art lover. They seem to get along very well. As for Colonel Stryker, he had been forced into a coma by Professor X's mind control and was lying on the seat at the back of the plane. "We can't keep this guy." That the murderous look in Hawking's eyes flashed away. Professor X planned to hand over Colonel Stryker to Nick Fury, but he didn't think that was a good idea. First of all, with Stryker's power and background, once he returns alive, as long as he operates well, it is not impossible to escape. With his hatred for mutants, he doesn't know what trouble he will cause in the future. Don't underestimate ordinary humans in the Marvel world. Due to the influence of various black technologies, it is not impossible for Stryker to create a super mutant one day. Another version of Deadpool, number 11, is an example. Secondly, killing an executioner like Stryker will definitely bring a lot of justice to the account, so it would be a pity to let him go. Anyway, in his eyes, Stryker is definitely a complete bad guy. Your son is a mutant who killed your wife by mistake. Instead of thinking about how to cure your son, you cruelly turned him into an experimental subject. You also killed all the mutants and experimented on many innocent mutant children. This is simply crazy. Moreover, for his own weapon, such a person does not deserve to die. Who else deserves to die? Killing him is definitely a very just thing. Finally, Stryker can be said to be one of the humans who knows the most about mutants in the world. If he falls into the hands of Nick Fury will have more information about mutants. Then the future is not a good one for the mutant school, especially now. S.H.I.E.L.D may still be Snake S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D has mastered the information and experimental data of mutants, which means that Hydra also has the information and experimental data of mutants. Although Nick Fury is arrogant, he at least has a bottom line. The people of Hydra don't know what the bottom line is, and who knows what will happen in the future. However, with Professor X's character, he would not let him kill Stryker just like that. It's okay. You can talk to Lao 1 about this matter. Lao 1 definitely doesn't want Stryker to be alive. It won't be a big problem if we cooperate when the time comes. Looking away from Stryker, Hawking began to close his eyes and sort out the newly acquired memories of Harry Potter. Now he already has the same wizard blood as Harry in his body, and also has all the memories of Harry's 14 years. As long as he practices diligently in the future, he will be able to master all the spells in Harry's memory. Harry's memory stayed at the end of the Goblet of Fire and Voldemort's resurrection, which meant that at least the curses from the 1st to 4th years of Hogwarts were in his memory. In addition, there are the Patronus charm taught by Professor Lupin and some various magic spells seen in the library. It's just that although Harry has learned a lot of spells, he is not proficient in using them. Except for some combat spells like disarming spells that he is good at, other spells are much worse than Hermione at the same time, but this does not affect Hawking. As long as he spends more time practicing, he may not be able to practice those spells that Harry is not good at better than Hermione. It seems it's just blood and nothing else. This is also a problem. At this moment, he thought of something again and raised his hand to touch his forehead. The lightning mark belonging to Harry did not exist. After loading the protagonist template, all he gets is the protagonist's bloodline and memory, and everything else will disappear. For example, the lightning mark on his forehead and the remnant soul of Voldemort in his body are all foreign things and do not belong to the bloodline, so naturally they will not be retained. But a problem arises, that is, although he has wizard blood now, he doesn't have a wand. Although it is not necessary to have a wand to perform magic, Harry does not know how to cast spells without a wand, so naturally he does not know how to do it. Moreover, the magic wand serves as a stabilizer and power amplifier for magic. Without the assistance of the magic wand, the effect of magic will be greatly reduced. Especially for a beginner like him, it is simply impossible to achieve stable spell casting success. Can I only cast magic when the Harry panel is loaded? No, he rejected this idea immediately as soon as it came out. He must not give up such a useful ability like magic. 1 hour is too short. He must find a way to solve this limitation. Perhaps, we can borrow some of this world's black technology. After thinking for a while, he suddenly had some ideas in his mind. How are magic wands made? In fact, it is to select some wood with special materials, add some parts of the body of some magical creatures, and then make it through special treatment. For example, Harry's wand is made of holly wood and phoenix feathers, Voldemort's is made of yew and phoenix feathers, and Snape's wand is made of birch wood and snake nerves. The Elder wand, one of the most famous 3 holy wands, is made of elder and thestral tail feathers. There was no way he could find those materials in this world. And even if he found them, he wouldn't be able to make them without the skills. But here is Marvel, a marvel full of black technology, whether it is superpowers, magic, or any other weird ability. As long as we find capable scientists, we can use the power of science to imitate and confront them. Similarly, the magic wand may not be something that cannot be analyzed from a scientific perspective. By studying its characteristics, we can find other ways to make similar things instead. Maybe if it goes well, he can enchant the long adamantium alloy stick he obtained before to add the properties of a wand. Thinking about how I poked you with a stick and you firmly grasped it with both hands, thinking you had blocked the attack, and then I hit you in the face and gnawed the big melon, it seemed very interesting. For example, for an enemy with self-healing ability like Wolverine, if you just stick a stick into the stomach and then cast an explosion spell, the effect will definitely be good. It just so happens that the Mutant Academy is also a place where black technology is relatively popular. When he gets some time, he can ask Professor X if there is any suitable scientist he can recommend. Chapter 30 It's Better to Be My Sister. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. As time passed, when the sun was just rising in the early morning, the plane finally arrived in New York and slowly landed in the backyard of the temporary shelter villa. As soon as he got off the plane and entered the villa, Hawking plunged into the basement where supplies were stored. His body was already ravenous from the previous high-intensity battle. When you're hungry, everything you eat is delicious. After a good beating, Hawking walked out of the basement with a satisfied look on his face. He finally understood why Wukong tasted so delicious every time he ate, because he was really hungry. Hawking, that as soon as he walked out of the basement and entered the lobby on the first floor, a figure in pajamas rushed towards him, jumped up and landed on him. Taking a closer look, it was little Wanda. It's only 6 o'clock now, why did you get up so early? Hawking patted Wanda on the back, put her down in surprise and asked. According to Wanda's habit, she usually doesn't get up that early unless the sun is basking her or her mother Elena is urging her. You were not here last night. I have been worried. I got up when I heard some movement outside in the morning. Professor Aurora told me that you were in the basement. Wanda started to chirp, and Hawking felt warm in his heart. To be honest, this feeling of being cared about and cared about all the time is really nice. He had never received this kind of treatment in his previous life. Where's Pietro? Pietro is still sleeping. He's sleeping like a baby. He even stole my pudding last night. Wanda kept complaining angrily. What? Pietro is so bad. Next time I will help you repair him. Come on, here are the lollipops I got from the basement. You and Pietro had one each, but now they are all yours. After pulling little Wanda to comfort her for a while, Hawking secretly sighed inwardly. After all, she is better as a younger sister. He knew that he felt sorry for Gigi. As for the younger brother, it's okay if you don't want him. Hawking is the best. Wanda took the 2 lollipops, immediately hugged Hawking's arms, stood on tiptoes and kissed him on the forehead. But you can't eat it now. You have to wait until you brush your teeth, otherwise it will be bad for your teeth. Passing through the living room and entering the corridor, as soon as he turned the corner, he met Magneto, who was also ready to rest and catch up on his sleep. Wanda, please go back to your room first. I have a few words to say to this old gentleman. With a thought in his heart, he coaxed Wanda away, and Hawking stopped Magneto. Mr. Eric, if you don't mind, do you have time to chat? Of course, I enjoy chatting with you. Seeing Hawking actively looking for him, Magneto was naturally willing. Under pressure from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain Marvel, he temporarily joined forces with Charles again, but that was only temporary, and the two would part ways sooner or later. It would be great if Hawking could be abducted. In fact, this was one of the reasons why he readily agreed to Charles's invitation. I would like to know what Mr. Eric thinks of Colonel Stryker's treatment. Hawking spoke tentatively. Magneto replied without any hesitation. In my opinion, it's best to kill him. However, your Professor Charles disagrees. He wants to use it to ease the relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D. and make them think that we are gentle and not aggressive. It is really naive. Having said this, Magneto couldn't help but sneered. If it weren't for the fact that he and Charles had just eased their relationship and promised that Charles would not kill anyone without his consent, he would have killed Stryker on the plane. What S.H.I.E.L.D. fears is our strength, not our attitude. If our strength is not enough, the better our attitude, the more dangerous it will be. That Colonel Stryker cannot live, he knows too many mutant secrets. Seeing that Eric's attitude was consistent with his own judgment, Hawking no longer concealed his opinion. It's a pity that I promised Charles that I can't take action. Magneto shrugged. Hawking heard this and smiled. Just because you can't take action doesn't mean that I can't take action. I didn't promise the professor anything, but in order to prevent the professor from stopping me, you need to do me a little favor. Ha ha ha, very good, Hawking, you are really good, I appreciate you more and more. Upon hearing Hawking's plan, Magneto was stunned for a moment, then laughed. He really didn't expect that Hawking would have such courage and dare to go against Charles's decision to come to him for cooperation. You must know that even Logan, the most decisive Wolverine, gave up the opportunity to kill Stryker for revenge under Charles's persuasion. On the contrary, Hawking, who had no hatred against Stryker, was determined to kill Stryker. I just want to better protect the school. Hawking spread his hands, looking innocent. Magneto King showed a meaningful expression. Actually, the things I have done in my life are just to better protect mutants. Hawking, you and I are really alike. Please consider joining my brotherhood again. Let's talk about this later. Seeing that Magneto agreed to help him, Hawking was too lazy to listen to his theories. He quickly waved his hand and returned to the room where he and Wanda brother and sister lived. In this regard, Magneto did not do much to stop him. He just looked at Hawking's back and murmured. Perhaps, if you can always be here, it would be good to replace Charles in the future. That he felt that even if Hawking did not join his brotherhood, it would be a good outcome if he grew up and replaced Charles as the leader of the mutant school in the future. With the character shown by Hawking, sooner or later the school of mutants will take the same path as him. 2 days later, in the main square of the mutant school, Hawking said goodbye to the reluctant Wanda and the somewhat reluctant Pietro, followed Professor X, Magneto and Mystique, escorted Colonel Stryker, and boarded the X-Fighter again. This time their destination was the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Tri-Wing building in Washington, D.C. In less than 2 days, Professor. The current school for mutants has returned to being the school for gifted teenagers in the eyes of outsiders. Everything that happened in the past few days seemed to have never happened. This also allowed Hawking to once again see the horror of Professor X's ability. To be honest, if Professor.it is indeed terrifying to delete and modify memories at will on a large scale, it was precisely because of this that he suddenly paid attention to the 2 curses in Harry Potter's memory. That is the forgetting spell and the false memory spell, which can also modify and delete memories. After experiencing the Chamber of Secrets incident in the 2nd grade, Harry knew these 2 spells, but Harry did not focus on these 2 spells at all. Unlike Hermione, who could apply them skillfully, Harry could actually use these 2 spells, but the effect would most likely be to turn the target of the spell into an idiot. So these 2 curses also exist in Hawking's memory.